hell?
레이즈, ちゃんと聞いてますか? あなたに言ってるんです。リロード。リロード。リロード。リロード。リロード中。
So tired.
So tired.
One side. Flanking for corner. You're stack for 6.
残り1名。
Ascendant. I gotta make a smurf because no one talks here. You know, everyone's fucking sweaty. Sweaty motherfuckers.
Is a warrant?
There's been
I guess it's a little personal, but you know, Sally, right?
God damn it. Cold. Cold. Yo, what's up? Yo.
I've never flown an aeroplane like this, where you can control the motion of the aeroplane so precisely.
I'm not sure we've even scratched the surface yet of what this airplane, when it's operating with other F-35, is going to be able to do.
The F-35B is arguably the most advanced plane ever made. A jack of all trades, a stealth fighter plane, combining and improving on the capabilities of the F-16, AV-8B Harrier, and the B-2. A highly maneuverable fighter plane, capable of attacking both airborne and ground-based targets. A stealth fighter taking the lessons learned from Lockheed's previous ventures into stealth with the F-22 Raptor and the F-117 Nighthawk. A plane fitted with the most advanced sensors and computer systems, sharing information almost instantly with allies, without compromising stealth, and presenting the information directly on a heads-up display on the pilot's helmet visor, giving unparalleled situational awareness, allowing a flight of F-35s to effectively fight as a hive mind. Perhaps most boldly of all, the F-35B is capable of transitioning from horizontal to vertical flight with a push of a button, using directional thrust and a massive vertical turbofan engine hidden within the plane's body, making it possible to land like a helicopter on the relatively small amphibious assault ships of the US Marines. This is the insane engineering of the F-35B. Fitting all these capabilities into a single airframe is an extremely difficult task. Designing for stealth demands careful molding of the exterior of the plane, dictating the design of crucial features, creating unavoidable trade-offs. There are a lot of misconceptions about stealth. The goal isn't to make the aircraft invisible. It will be detectable. The goal is to delay enemy detection for as long as possible. For bomber aircraft, it shrinks the range of the enemy's radar stations, potentially opening gaps in radar defenses and allowing the aircraft to slip through undetected. For fighter aircraft, it provides a critical advantage: detect your enemy before they detect you. To gain these advantages, we need to make it harder for the radar receiver to decipher whether the return signal is just background noise or an enemy aircraft. To do that, we need to minimize the strength of the return signal. There are several mechanisms for a radar wave to be reflected. The most significant and most obvious way is through spectral return, otherwise known as regular reflection, like a mirror, where the angle of reflection equals the angle of incidence. We want to avoid large, flat surfaces that could reflect straight back to the radar receiver. Corner reflectors of two surfaces set at a 90-degree angle to each other need to be avoided at all costs. Tail consistent vertical and horizontal stabilizer are the perfect surfaces to create a corner reflector, allowing radar to bounce off both surfaces and return right back in the direction it came. The best way to avoid this is to remove the tail completely, like the B2, but this impacts maneuverability greatly. Instead, we can replace both the horizontal and vertical stabilizer with a V-tail, as seen on the F-117 Nighthawk. The V-tail can act as both a rudder and an elevator, and we can see how by examining the resultant force generated when the control surfaces are actuated to different positions. We can actuate them in opposite directions to generate.
No, man, I should have played. Jesus, dude. Me buying this fucking Bosch.
Reload.
敵残り1名。
気を抜くな。戦場でやり直しは効かないぞ。政治がいるなら話は別だ。
A horizontal resultant force, providing yaw control as a vertical rudder would. Or we can deflect them in the same direction to provide pitch control as a horizontal elevator would. This configuration is sometimes used for unique-looking aircraft like the Cirrus SF-50, allowing it to mount a single tiny jet engine on top of the fuselage, with its exhaust directed straight through the V-tail. A private jet so tiny and lightweight that it can deploy a parachute to rescue itself in emergencies. Having rudder and elevator controls linked to a single mechanism like this is not ideal. Fighter jets like the F-35 and the F-22 need superior control authority, and that is a function of control surface area. The larger the elevator, the larger the pitch control. If a control surface is working in control, rudder and elevator action is needed at the same time, it reduces the control authority. So, both planes also feature large elevators, offset by a distance and angle to prevent corner reflections. We can see many more trade-offs in design by comparing the F-117 and the F-35 in the quest to fulfill both stealth and fighter requirements. Both the F-117 and B-2 have their engine air intakes mounted on the upper surface of the plane, which prevents ground-based radar from bouncing around inside the intake and back to the receiver, and helps reduce infrared heat signatures. However, for a plane expected to make high angle of attack maneuvers in life and death situations, this isn't a design you would want to include. While performing a maneuver like this, the air intake will receive lower pressure air, which will lower performance right when performance is needed most. Air intakes located underneath the aircraft, like the F-16, will cause too much radar return, so twin intakes located on either side of the fuselage are instead chosen. These air intakes have some clever aerodynamic features too. This seemingly innocuous bump plays an important role. This is aeronautical engineering epitomized. Every seemingly insignificant design feature has a purpose. Mounting engine intakes along the body of an aircraft comes with some issues that pylon-mounted engines avoid. As air travels along the length of the body, air begins to form a layer of slow-moving, turbulent air called a boundary layer. If this air is allowed to enter the engine, it not only lowers performance, but it can also damage the engine. As the turbine rotates, it will pass through the slow boundary air on one side and then fast stream free air on the other. This means the force on the turbine blade changes for each and every rotation, causing cyclical bending, a recipe for fatigue failure. Planes like the F-16 feature a boundary layer diverter that separates the inlet from the fuselage with a small gap. But this design increases radar cross-section and increases drag. Later variants of the F-16 tested the DSI, the divertless supersonic inlet, essentially a large bump that creates a region of compression that pushes the boundary layer air away from the inlet, while also scattering incoming radar and lowering drag. The test flight demonstrated that it could meet performance requirements, ushering in its introduction to the F-35. The final product reduces weight by 30% and lowers production and maintenance costs. Moving down the plane, you can see other hints of stealth design. Long, sharp edges are the enemy of stealth. Sharp edges causes radar waves to scatter in all directions. Radar can even travel along the length of a surface in the form of a traveling wave and then scatter at an edge. The strength of that return signal can be reduced with a few clever techniques. The strength of the signal will depend on the length of the edge. So, the first technique is to reduce the edge length with serration. You can see this technique implemented very clearly on the trailing edge of E2. However, it's less obvious where it's used for the F-35 until you start looking at all the access hatches hidden around the aircraft. Every single unavoidable surface gap on the aircraft has a serrated edge. This hatch opens to reveal a telescoping ladder to allow.
That is so cool. It's so fucking cool. Oh shit.
A に敵確認ここ
最後の一人だ A でキャリアダウン残り1名
Allow pilots to climb in and out of the aircraft. These open to reveal the landing gear. These are the internal weapons bay, essential for keeping the radar reflecting missiles hidden from view. And these smaller hatches are flare dispenser doors. Flares are effective decoys for heat-seeking missiles, but they do nothing to prevent radar-guided missiles. In the face of radar-guided missile proliferation and continued growing sophistication in technology, a new decoy system was developed.
Nag-reload.
Teki, 残り1名
Pagano.
私の装備
Ace.
まだ何も壊れてない。すごくない？
Guess it's gonna be a quick stream, huh? Yes. I'm gonna go to bed after this one. I'm tired as fuck.
Reload.
行くよ。うせな。
恐怖を見せてやる。
波を砕け。
グレネード。爆弾起動。
押し流せ。
ここよ。ここよ。B に敵がいる。リロード中。
水の壁だ。
まだ終わりじゃないわ。で、どうなんだ？グレネー
敵
ド。
残り1名。攻守交代前最終ラウンド。
後には何も残りません。すべて使いましょう。装備くれない？
Fuck.
Thank you.
リロード。リロード。
撃たれるなよ。
リロード。恐れるがいい。闇に惑え。踊るがいい。
波を砕け。波を砕け。スパイク設置。
Hindi na marunong maglaro.
最後の一人だ。
Mahina na ako ngayon.
This new technology is released from this panel. When needed, this access door opens and a transmitter begins to reel out to a safe distance behind the plane. It has 3 levels of countermeasures to protect the F-35 from attack. First, it actively jams missiles while they attempt to lock onto their target by emitting jamming signals which the onboard computer computes and delivers to the emitter through the fiber optic tow line. If the radar manages to obtain a lock, it then begins to attempt to break the lock, disrupting the tracking algorithms guiding the missile towards its target. Finally, if all is lost and the missile is bearing down on the aircraft, the emitter begins to simulate the aircraft's radar signature, drawing the missile toward it as a decoy. These serrated hatches hide critical components of the F-35, but more can be done to reduce edge scattering in these locations. You may notice that the color around these edges is different to the rest of the plane. This is because the edges are treated with a special radar scattering tape. In the same way traveling waves scatter when they meet an edge discontinuity, they will scatter when traveling over a change in conductivity. The F-35 uses this to its advantage to scatter waves over a longer distance, reducing the return signal by spreading it out. The tape has a conductivity gradient, gradually decreasing its electrical conductivity, causing radar waves to scatter at each interval, slowly decreasing the intensity of the surface wave before it reaches the edge, where it would have released one large return if the tape was not present. The surface of the plane itself is also composed of a specialized radar-absorbing material. In 2010, Lockheed Martin filed this patent for a carbon nanotube infused composite material that can absorb radar waves from 0.1 MHz through to 60 GHz. This is an incredibly wide range of frequencies, notably covering the frequencies Russian surface-to-air missiles like the advanced S-400 system uses. the effect traveling surface waves have on stealth design can be seen elsewhere. You would imagine a cylinder would be a great way to scatter radar in all directions, lowering the strength of the return signal. But if a radar wave comes in tangentially to a cylinder, and the wavelength is at least 1/10 the cylinder's circumference, the wave can actually travel around the outside of the cylinder and travel straight back to the receiver. This is likely why the F-35 features a sharp edge leading up the circular nose cone. Where the F-16 has a nearly perfect circular nose cone, the F-35 features a ridge. The largest hatch on the plane is strangely not serrated, and this is for good reason. This hatch hides the powerful lift fan within. The airflow in and out of this lift fan needs careful consideration. The lift fan is essentially a tiny helicopter, capable of generating 85 kilonewtons of vertical thrust, and in doing so creates a low pressure zone above the plane, violently sucking air into the aircraft at a 90-degree angle. This air has to travel over the hood to reach the inlet, and thus the hood needs to allow air to smoothly pass over it without creating too much turbulent flow, which would lower the performance of the lift fan. This is why the inlet door is not serrated, as the sharp edges would cause distortions in the flow. This hood alone went through several design iterations to optimize the airflow over it. The demonstration X-35 aircraft had two doors open to the side of the aircraft. This was changed for the aircraft in favor of a rear hinge door. This helps funnel air into the engine and improves pressure recovery on short takeoffs, where the F-35B does not take off vertically, instead using the lift fan and directional thrust of the rear nozzle to take off on extremely short runways. The way this aircraft transforms to perform vertical landing and short takeoffs is astounding. It's the closest thing to a transformer we have ever created. When the time comes, a clutch linking the extended drive shaft of the F-35's engine begins to transfer 29,000 horsepower to the bevel gear of the lift fan, spinning the contra-rotating lift fan blades. Simultaneously, gears begin to rotate in the rear exhaust nozzle. The mechanics of this nozzle are another wonder to behold. Called the three-bearing swivel nozzle, it is composed of three airtight segments cut at angles relative to one another. We can change the shape of the nozzle by rotating these angled pieces separately. These three pieces rotate together to smoothly transition thrust downwards, but it's easier to understand how it works by seeing what happens when we rotate segments individually. Rotating the central piece can take the nozzle from 0 degrees down to 45 degrees. This position is used for short takeoffs, splitting the engine's power between thrust and lift. This mode is as impressive as the vertical takeoffs, allowing the plane to operate from shorter amphibious assault ships like the USS Mackinac Island, a ship just 258 meters long. Its minimum takeoff distance decreases even further with the aid of a ski jump, a ramp that has been added to smaller amphibious assault ships. Watching the F-35 take off over such short distances is incredible. In this clip, you can see the rear nozzle quickly adjusting its angle of thrust in sync with the rear elevators to adjust the pitch of the plane to ensure a safe takeoff. For a vertical landing, the final nozzle segment can rotate to provide the full 90-degree turn. The first nozzle segment can rotate to move the nozzle from side to side, but here it's needed to ensure the thrust doesn't move sideways as the nozzle transitions. As we saw, when we rotate the segments individually, they move in an arc that would cause the F-35 to spin out of control. This mechanism also allows the F-35 to smoothly transition from cruise to vertical flight, and from vertical flight to cruise when needed. There are additional control mechanisms to ensure this precarious balancing act does not go wrong. Bleed air from the main engine bypass is siphoned to two roll nozzles located on each wing, providing thrust far away from the plane's center of pressure to control roll. There are also guide vanes located underneath the lift fan. These can adjust the outlet area to adjust the performance of the lift fan, but can also control the thrust of the lift fan from 5 degrees forward to 42 degrees backwards. With computer-assisted control of these control mechanisms, the F-35 is remarkably stable compared to its predecessor, the AV-8B Harrier, allowing the single engine of the F-35 to hover on 2 columns of air. To do this, the F-35's engine, the F-135, developed from the F-119 engine of the F-22 Raptor, had to be incredibly powerful. The F-22 Raptor is a twin-engine fighter, giving it plenty of excess power to pull off incredible maneuvers. The F-35 only has one engine and needs to squeeze out all the power it can get to perform a vertical landing. Where the F-22's engine can generate 156 kilonewtons of thrust, the F-35's can generate 191. The F-35's engine has a much larger fan and bypass duct, giving it twice the bypass ratio of its F-22 counterpart, providing the F-35 with a more efficient engine for cruise, but also a higher mass flow rate for higher thrust. However, this does come with some drawbacks. Air that travels around the engine core completely avoids the combustion chamber, and thus misses out on the acceleration generated there, reducing the exhaust velocity. This reduces the top speed of the plane. The max speed of the F-35 is 1.6 Mach, and while it's the first plane capable of vertical flight and supersonic flight, the F-22 can fly at 2.2 Mach. The F-35